Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 92 of Fracking Nightmare. This is broadcasting live from Plymouth, England, on Monday, the 12th of September 2016. And we are delighted to report that the UK is still frack-free ever since the moratorium was lifted in 2012, December of 2012. But nonetheless, the pressure is increasing dramatically. And although it's looking like we will end 2016 frack-free here in the UK, there's little doubt that the industry and the British government are determined that 2017 will be the year that they get their bits in the ground. Now, tonight, I am absolutely delighted to welcome back a tremendous advocate of anti-fracking, somebody who literally has lived with it for a past decade. And his face has become very familiar to many people around the UK as he and his son, David, and of course I refer to Brian Monk, have appeared on the artwork for the screenings of Voices from the Gas Fields. And it's really thanks to Brian Monk that I spent a few days with him and his family in southern Queensland back in 2014. And we were able to produce the documentary, and thanks to my good friend Marco Jackson, who did an excellent job with the editing, and to release the documentary in fact, on March 21st of 2014. Now, according to YouTube, that documentary has been viewed by something in the region of about 36,000 people. And again, according to the YouTube statistics, it has only been viewed in Australia by about 3,000 people, which, considering the fact that it was widely promoted around social media in Australia, seems a rather low figure. So it's really early in the morning out in southern Queensland. The sun hasn't yet risen. But it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Brian Monk to the show. Brian, how are you doing there?
Look, I'm doing well. It's not that early over here. We have a very long dawn, so it's been starting to become daylight for about the last hour. So
the background might get a bit lighter as we go through the show.
Yes, look, I've tried every setting on this laptop, which I often am very tempted to teach flying lessons to try and get brightness, and this is the best.
No, it looks great. No, it's really great. I mean, it's just on a black background. It's absolutely fine. So, Brian, I mean, it's it's almost 2 years since I was out with you and the family, and you very kindly put me up and spent the time with me to show me around the gas fields, and obviously contribute very significantly to the footage that was incorporated into Voices from the Gas Fields. Now, just a quick question though. What's your thoughts on that YouTube statistic that only 3,000 people have watched it in Australia?
Oh, look, I think that's very hard to believe, Ian. We've seen our counters go up and down depending on what they want to do at a given time. So I have very little faith in YouTube counters at all.
So, I mean, obviously the industry tries to, or the establishment tries to convey the impression that no one's really looking at this, no one's really interested. But at the end of the day, the numbers don't really matter, do they? Because once people have seen it, they can't unsee it.
And the other thing that would happen, in particular in Australia, is that a lot of people here have very, very limited internet connectivity. So a lot of people would actually capture that video and then take it to their groups, which, of course, doesn't show on the counters other than a once-off, but it might have been shown to 100 people. I know that's being naughty, but I know people capture our videos all the time as well. So the counter, I'm sure, lies very badly, but I'm also pretty confident that a lot more people have seen it, because I have people constantly asking me about that documentary. So clearly, people are seeing it. Just because it's not showing up on the counter, I mean, let's face it, YouTube's their tool. I'm surprised we're allowed to use it at all.
Well, there is that. There is that. So it's 2 years since I was with you. Back then, there was something like about 18,000 wells that had been drilled in southern Queensland, and of course, I mean, not even including the underground coal gasification just a few miles to the west of you, around Chinchilla. But what's the current status in southern Queensland?
Well, it's a lot quieter around us because we're pretty much drilled out, although I see Origin's now starting to mark out our neighbouring properties to the east. So, and they've had their supposed environmental people wandering around, you know, catching the odd bird or possum or whatever before they chop the trees down or bulldoze the pipelines. But so it's going to pick up for us again. And of course, Shell has taken over BG Group. So we're now playing for the one half of our property. We're now playing with Shell. Not that we hear anything at all from the industry. I have to say, and I keep saying this to people, that if no doesn't mean no, then it's quite funny that when QGC tried to get on and couldn't, they went away. Then when BG Group bought them out and tried to get on and couldn't, they went away. And now Shell, who's bought out BG Group, hasn't even bothered to send a letter or a, hello, we've bought tenement that sits under your property. We're coming in to drill. We're virtually in the cone of silence here.
Maybe they've got the message. So,
well,
go on.
As I've said many times, if they want to prove that no Australian owns their land, then cut the gate and come in and drill the gas wells, and then you will have proven that the foundation of Australian society, and that is the great Australian dream of owning your own home or your own piece of land, means absolutely nothing. And I'm not sure. I know we've been disarmed courtesy of Port Arthur, but overall, I can't help but feel that anarchy will prevail somewhere along the line if they want to prove beyond any doubt that we live in a lawless society.
Well, I mean, that's possibly the case. I mean, they're picking their battles carefully. I mean, they've literally raped and pillaged the natural resources of southern Queensland, and they don't want to push it to the next level until such time as they've run out of landowners who they can literally bribe into submission. But now, looking at some of the successes for a second, or apparent successes. I mean, a lot is being made in the UK of the fact that Victoria, the state of Victoria, has announced a ban on fracking. I believe that the statement was that the benefits. I think I've got a screen grab here. This is from the British paper, The Guardian. Victoria to permanently ban fracking and coal seam gas exploration. Activists and farmers hailed the decision after inquiry into offshore unconventional gas received 1,600 submissions. The Victorian government said the fracking ban acknowledges that the risks involved outweigh any potential benefits. What's your thoughts on that, Brian?
Look, I think it's a great win for Victoria. Victoria got in boots and all very quickly, and they started agitating. They've been agitating for quite a long while. And also because it's a smaller state, it's far easier to mobilise. Not that they really needed to; they just mobilised politically, and they have won a significant battle. One of the interesting things in the report on unconventional gas in Victoria, and this is something that probably all the people in the UK should be downloading and looking at. It was done by a uni professor, to the best of my knowledge, and the way I see it, the universities in Victoria haven't been purchased by the fossil fuel industry as yet. But this person clearly goes through all the unknowns that have great risk of having an impact on health and environment. Now, they're listing that well, they've put that on the record now. They're saying, what about the BTEX? What about the frac fluids? What about the water extraction? All these things that we talk about every day, they've put on the record now in a Victorian Parliament document, and that is going to have to be a very usable document for a lot of people all around the world if they want to do their homework and find it and download it, because here you've got a university and a government that's saying these are the things that we are worried about. Now, in reality, we both know that governments only worry about whether they can get elected next election, but they've allowed an official document to be tabled, which really surprised me. When I read that, I thought, wow, that shows that that state is not possessed by the fossil fuel industry as yet. And people need to use that document as they need to use the document that I put up a while ago by the chief economist of the federal government, when he published an absolute piece of drivel that had a time frame. They cut the time frame exactly when the boom was still going in this region here. But of course, the boom is gone now. The construction boom is gone. And if they were to redo that report right now, then they would find hundreds of empty houses, dozens of businesses gone bad, and unemployment through the roof. But they picked a very crucial time for their cut-off point. And people need to learn this, because they will use that report against everyone else anywhere in the world. People need to know that they can debunk that and get rid of that report completely.
And this is the report produced by the Queensland government?
No, this is produced by the Australian chief economist.
Okay.
I'll try and dig it out again later on. And I'll put it up on the top of my Facebook page.
Okay, yeah, and we'll put a link under the YouTube of tonight's program. But of course, go on.
Oh no, it's just that there's a lot of these reports that people have never challenged. I mean, we have on YouTube, but as you know, you don't get very many views supposedly, and even the people that look at the debunking of a report, like that one of the lows are the high points. The CSIRO came out here and tested 43 gas wells picked by the industry itself. And when I emailed them and asked them about high point vents and flare stacks and low point drains and all these other emission points, leaking pipelines, etc., they hadn't even tested them, and yet they turn around and say Australia's got a much higher standard of gas extraction. And you think, I've never seen such drivel in my life, but it's all they have to do. They spin the spin, and I don't know, people fall for it hook, line or sinker, or worse than that, the people that are fighting it don't actually tear that report to pieces and say, here's the new report that truly identifies that the boom was a disaster for Queensland and that so many locals now have just moved away. It's gutted our communities. And but people, even the activists, even the most dedicated of activists, just don't seem to be committed enough to tear reports apart, and so they get them used against them everywhere.
But part of the problem, Brian, I think, is that, and I'm going to sort of choose my words carefully, but Australia has created the impression that there is a national organisation, a national NGO that's taking care of fighting against the unconventional gas industry. And this is the NGO known as Lock the Gate. But unfortunately, any NGO, and I could be talking about Friends of the Earth or Greenpeace or any of the other NGOs, they do not have the resources to pick apart every single report or study or academic document. And this is absolutely a critical point, because it's why in my opinion, and obviously I'd appreciate your opinion, but it's why we have to get the communities in each of these areas completely engaged and empowered, so that we literally have the resources and people are motivated to look at whatever it is that is out there. And if you've got enough people on the case, then somebody somewhere will pick up these reports and the detail of these reports and challenge them.
Yeah, look, I think I've said this plenty of times. I was at the first state meeting and the first national meeting of Lock the Gate. I truly did believe that was what was going to happen. I believed that, I sat with the retired Supreme Court judges and in that first national meeting, and that was exactly what that was exactly what was talked about at that first meeting. That's where I thought it was going to go. And I understand in the early days it was under-resourced terribly, but it was also probably funded by or supported by someone that had one foot in the fossil fuel industry anyway. And I think the problem is that whilst I know hundreds upon hundreds of Lock the Gate members who are absolutely lovely, beautiful, dedicated people, even people at high levels of the organisation, it took a wrong turn somewhere because, unlike you, I don't believe that it doesn't have the resources to do this. I believe it does have the resources to do this, and it's not being done. And that's because somewhere along the line, it took a wrong turn and it became a social club that thought that just nailing a few yellow triangles up was going to stop the industry, and it doesn't. The only thing that stops the industry are communities and individual landowners that say, no, we're not going to have a bar of that. And once that goes into place, then this industry's dead. It can't exist without the compliance of the landowner. And okay, I'm not saying they won't. Well, I don't think they'll ever come through someone's gate and throw them on the ground, but who knows? Maybe they will. But I mean, we're heading for a fascist governments worldwide now. So, who knows? Maybe it'll be off to the firing squad for you if you say no. I don't know. But at this point in time, there's no excuse for a landowner not to say no. Now, I watch legal aid, I watched the government, I watched the industry, I watched Ag Force, which is, excuse me, our Farmers Federation up here in Queensland. I watched them all run around all over the state of Queensland telling people they couldn't say no, and that was the EDO as well. So these government departments and legal representatives, and if you go to a lawyer, they're going to tell you can't say no because a lawyer must live in legislation. And I'm sure it's the same in the UK, but as you would know, a Queen's Counsel can drag any court case, if you can get a court case, can have it appealed to higher courts. Now, I can't remember what your court is. Is it the Privy Court or your highest court?
The Supreme Court.
Supreme Court, okay. So people who understand and practice law, not legislation. So most solicitors practice legislation, not all of them, but most of them. I know a few that are just waiting for a case to be able to be taken to High Court in Australia. But you've got to lose a case before you can appeal a case. And the industry has been very careful not to make sure they've never won a case that can be appealed.
Yeah.
So a landowner has to lose before he can get a case heard in the High Court. Well, first he's got to go to the Supreme Court and then eventually the High Court. And they've been very careful. And that's what reinforces my belief that the law stands with the title holder for access to the surface of his land. I'm not saying that it gives him the right to the minerals, although I would be very surprised if it didn't. But yeah, and that was another thing that was also discussed in that first meeting of Lock the Gate, was the fact that if they extract gas from underneath your property, they should be compensating you for every area under your property that is had the gas extracted from under it. So if they extract, like they pay you for 1 hectare up here, or whatever that is, 2 and a bit acres, and what these judges were saying, retired judges were saying, was that isn't really right, because if they extract from completely under your property, then they should be compensating you for everything extracted from under your entire property, not just under a piece of gravel that they build in the middle of your paddock. But anyway, back to your question, do I think that the NGOs could have achieved more? Yes, I do. Do I think that community groups and individual landowners are the only solution? Yes, because NGOs become like a government department, and they have their special meetings and they drag people off their jobs to go to meetings here, there, and everywhere, and in the process they use up the precious small resource that they have, being a public service, basically, or the equivalent of a public service, which we all know run 99% of the time like absolute crap.
Sadly, yeah. And now, this is just going back to a comment you made about the creeping fascist state. And, we know, of course, that TTIP, the Trans-Pacific Trade, TTP for you, the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership. For us, it's the TTIP, which, at least for the moment, has been sort of kicked to the sidelines. But TTP, of course, is being pushed ahead. And this was a comment that I picked up from Reuters after the after the Victorian government's decision. And almost immediately, one company, Lakes Oil, announced that it was planning to sue the state. And of course, this is straight out of the TPP/TTIP playbook, where the attempt is to create a raft of legislation that has supremacy over nation state or national law, national legislation. And the article read that Lakes Oil shares sank 50% in the first trading since the fracking ban was announced. And it was the second most active stock on the Australian exchange, as obviously investors tried to cut their losses and get out as quickly as possible. But the company, in a bid to effectively halt the decline, stated that it would sue the Victorian government. Now, of course, I mean, at the moment, we know in France that after the French government put a ban on, or upheld the presidential ban on fracking, then Stuttgart, the Texan company, also announced that it was just waiting for the opportunity to sue the French government for loss of revenue. So here are two examples, one from TTIP, the other one for TPP, as to why this legislation must never gain traction.
The moment that they allow that legislation in, it's almost like voting a fascist president into power over the planet, and nothing will stand between the name that can't be mentioned, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and all these people. Nothing will stand between them and basically world economic domination, which they probably already have anyway. But any government that approves, for mine, any government at all, I don't care, be it Australia, America, UK, anywhere in Europe, any government that approves the signing of the TPP is committing treason, as far as I'm concerned, and should be treated accordingly, and probably treated all the way back to, where treason was rewarded in the most dire of punishments. So, yes, the TPP is really the introduction of or the completion of the New World Order, isn't it? When it's all said and done. Yeah. So wherever people have, so the few, the 0.01% or 0.0001% will have total control of pretty much everyone's lives and well-being. And we see that, we're already seeing that anyway. I mean, you would be very naive not to see that drones attacking Pakistan and Afghanistan and Libya, Syria, uh, if people can't see what's going on, I mean, all these people that jump, oh, ISIS, I'd never even heard of the friggin' word until, you know, until they invented it. You know, I always wonder if it doesn't mean something else, you know. I'm sure it does, like Al Qaeda.
Yeah,
A
like
person wrote a
database.
great.
Yeah,
Sorry.
like Al Qaeda database, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting though. Al Qaeda, a person did quite a good YouTube clip on the fact that they believed that originally it was the Qaeda was CIA, and of course, well, we know now from history clearly most of these false flags and reasons to start a war. I mean, how could you start a war on Iraq? In all fairness, well, what did he have to do with Osama bin Laden, who supposedly blew the Pentagon up without any aeroplane parts left on the, or you know, initially without any aeroplane parts? I mean, how do you invade a country that's full of oil on the pretext that what? I can't even join the dots. The dots are so far apart, you'd have to draw an imaginary line for that invasion.
Well, sadly, of course, that's exactly what the establishment rely on. They rely on the vast majority of people not having the time, even if they have the inclination, to spend any time joining the dots. And I mean, the magnitude of cognitive dissonance. I mean, you know, we've seen it today. You know, I mean, obviously here we are in nearly a day after the 15th anniversary of 9/11. And the pro-fracking community in this country, which is very, very small, outside of the industry, it's a handful of people. And, you know, that they're so desperate that, you know, they try and sort of make the point that, you know, and certain prominent anti-frackers also question the events of 9/11 like that's an insult.
Yeah,
You know,
I see that as yeah.
It's staggering, isn't it? Brian, we've got to go to the first break, and I just want to introduce this first break. So you got a time get a cup of tea if you want. We've got a few minutes here. But last week I had the pleasure of once again screening the documentary. And I can't thank you and David and your families and of course John and Joe Jenkins for the contribution that you made to this. And everybody who sees the documentary is deeply moved. And, we know that the British government or a certain department in the British government tried to take this documentary apart. They got a third-party consultant to review it. And after a review and subsequent discussions, apparently the decision was to simply ignore it, not draw attention to it, which was probably a smart move on their part. Well, I had the opportunity to show this in a little community in a place called Stocksbridge. Now, Stocksbridge is right over on the edge of the Pennines here, and in fact, it's located in this this almost lonely licensed area here, just to the northwest of Sheffield. And there it is. And I was explaining to the people the sort of magnitude that they were under attack. And of course, the companies that are attacking them are primarily INEOS and iGas, a couple of licenses from Quadrilla. But the license over Stocksbridge is held by a company called Warwick. And Warwick is a US-based company, and they're just putting their toe in the water here in the UK in this round of licensing. But they're not to be underestimated, because in the US they have significant interests in the shale plays right throughout the central US there. So they are certainly not minnows in the game by any stretch of the imagination, although few people have heard of them here. Well, the MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge is a lady by the name of Angela Smith. Now, she probably believes that she's doing the best she can for her constituents by trying to pump prime the rapidly declining British steel industry, because Stocksbridge certainly has a lot of people who were once employed in the steel industry. And so Angela Smith is profoundly pro-fracking, as we shall see in a second. But interestingly, Angela Smith has a namesake who farms in Pennsylvania, and her experience is very different. And I wonder if these two Angela Smiths could actually be put in touch with each other, and so that the Angela Smith of Penistone and Stocksbridge might truly do the right thing by her constituents. So take a look at this during the break.
South Yorkshire Labour MP believes one solution might lie in the shale gas industry.
In essence, we need to understand, I think, that the nascent shale gas industry offers one of those rare opportunities to create a new demand for steel, something that we badly need at the moment, and a new sense of hope, therefore, for a positive future for what is one of our foundation industries. The opportunities for steel as part of the shale gas supply chain focus on two main capabilities. First of all, the industry could need over 12,000 kilometres of high-quality steel casing, costing £2.3 billion, as was pointed out earlier. And the industry could need 50 drilling rigs, costing £1.6 billion to manufacture.
Name is Angela Smith, married to Wayne Smith. We have beef cattle, blueberry bushes. We've been fighting the gas company since 2007. We were approached by PG&E to sign a lease, and that was back in 2000. We didn't know anything about a gas lease, and when they came in here, their first story was, your neighbors did, why don't you? We still didn't sign. And then they came back and said, you're not going to see anybody, go ahead and sign it. And we still refused. And then they came back and said, look, if you don't sign it and they find gas, they're just going to suck it right out from underneath your feet. You're not going to get a dime. They came in, they were production wells. In 2006, they shut down the production wells, and they made them into storage wells. So with the storage wells, they're injecting and withdrawing. When they drill, they cause water problems. And with injection and withdrawal, they're causing water problems too. In January 2007, we had a horse go down and was like neurological. She just kicked her feet and she couldn't get up. And she had to be put down. And then in April, we had another cow go down that showed the same symptoms. Then we lost dogs and chickens, and we found out we had arsenic in our water and methane in our water, and we ended up getting a $11,000 water unit so us and our animals could have drinking water.
They built a compressor station right outside the woods here, and no well behind us, pipelines. They went in there and tore all the trees out, leveled dirt up in there and packed it, and built a compressor station. And that's the noise maker. Food to water, aquifer, is not worth. It's no future.
In 2009, the compressor station blew up and blew oil all over people's property. We had it on our vehicles, our blueberries, everything that was outside got this coating of oil. When I call my regular customers and say, hey, the blueberries are in, they'll say, oh, well, don't they have methane on them? I couldn't leave here thinking that somebody else might buy it and get the headaches. Like my husband, he wants to leave the property to our 3 grandchildren, and I keep saying, why do you want to leave death to the grandchildren? Because that's what it is, it's death. You're either going to have a pipeline blow up, you're going to have a well blow up, you have contamination, you have a compressor station that likes to blow up. Who would want to live here?
Well, that's Angela and Wayne Smith from Clearville in Pennsylvania, whose experience with the gas industry dates back to just 2007. And of course, Brian Monk's experience with the gas industry dates back just to 2006. So when we look at the magnitude of the contamination and the destruction, particularly of the water supply, which of course in turn leads to the devastation of quality farming land, the devastation of livestock, and the inability to grow crops. And that's all in the space of a decade. And of course, both Queensland and indeed Australia, Pennsylvania and indeed the US are much larger land masses, and the population density of those countries is a lot less than it is here in the UK. So obviously the impact here would be exponential compared to those countries. So Angela Smith, MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge, please do a little bit of research. Please talk to those people in your community who have done their research. And whilst I sympathise that you are trying to do the best for your constituents by trying to kickstart the steel industry, this is not the way to do it. And it will lead to phenomenal devastation. So now, back with Brian, but Brian's been having a little bit of difficulty with his camera, coupled with the rapidly rising sunlight. So Brian, I know you're still playing with your camera there. So while you're getting that sorted out, I'll give you a little bit more time there. But we've also got some other events coming up in the UK. And there's an event tomorrow, and this is in Kimberworth, Rotherham. And let me just bring this up on screen. There we go. And this is an event, I believe it's being presented by the extremely well-informed Dave Burley. He's been a tireless campaigner in South Yorkshire. I think I first met Dave at Barton Moss nearly 3 years ago. And he's been working to ensure that communities throughout South Yorkshire are stimulated in their curiosity to take a look at this for themselves. And he and other people, Andy from Barnsley and Dale from Stocksbridge and many others in South Yorkshire are trying to ensure that the unconventional gas industry does not enjoy the same free ride that they had in Queensland, but meets more like the opposition that they came up against in Victoria. Now, there is also, that event, let's just go back to that. So tomorrow night, that's at the Green Dragon in High Street, Kimberworth, Rotherham. Postcode is S61 2BH. And the title of the event is, Are We Going to Be Fracked? Well, I'll give you the answer to that. The answer is yes, unless local communities actually get engaged, get involved, and educate themselves, and then mount a robust community resistance against the mother frackers. So please, if you're in the area, go along to that event tomorrow night. Now, this coming weekend in Driffield, this is in East Yorkshire, because of course we know that East Yorkshire, like Lancashire, is very much under attack right now, and this is a rally in Driffield. And well, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but we'll go ahead with the second break here. And this is a lovely short promo produced by the outstanding video maker Dave Morris. So take a look at this.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
That's Driffield this coming Saturday, September 17th. Meet from 11 o'clock onwards along the Beverley Road, and the parade begins at 12 noon. Now, just to show people who live in the area why this is so important, here we are. Here's a map of East Yorkshire. There is Driffield, due north of Beverley, and of course we had the Crawberry Hill campaign. Crawberry Hill, of course, a very successful campaign there, because Rathin Energy have now returned the Crawberry Hill well site back to, I won't quite say its former agricultural glory, because the land is just lying fallow right now. But this is the magnitude of the licenses across Yorkshire, certainly much of East and North Yorkshire here. And there's Driffield right in the heart of it. And who are the protagonists? Well, there we have it. Quadzilla in the dark blue, Ineos, their licenses in the lighter blue, and just to the north, of course, Third Energy, who have permission to frack their existing well at Kirby Misperton. So just to put that in perspective, you know, right across the whole of the north of England, apart from the High Pennines, the north of England is under environmental attack. And this is an area that is much smaller, much smaller than southern Queensland. But the population density here, you know, bears no comparison. So, of course, it's not just those three companies. It's not just Quadrilla, Ineos, or Third Energy. There's a number of other companies there, not least iGas, of course, Warwick, I've already mentioned, Hutton Energy, Alkane. So, you know, it's really, really important. There is far too much going on here for any one NGO or even multiple NGOs to take care of, or even a single anti-fracking group. Every community in this area of Yorkshire needs to nurture an anti-fracking community, because the more people that are engaged in this, the more opportunity there is to examine the documents. As Brian makes the observation, that's something they weren't able to do in Australia. They didn't have, well, he says they did have the resources. There were other reasons why they didn't review the documents. But in this country, we certainly haven't got the resources unless people within all of these communities feel empowered to get involved. Anybody, and I mean anybody, who tells you that they have the answer, that they are the panacea to this, they are either delusional or they have some other agenda. The only way in which this industry is stopped is by every community stepping up and standing up to this industry and saying no. And in a little while, in fact, I'm going to play it now, because then we'll go back to Brian. There's a short extract from Voices from the Gasfields, and this has become an iconic extract. And this is Brian and David summarising what, in their opinion, communities need to do to shut this insidious industry down.
If at this point in time you can stand in front of a drill rig and stop it from getting on, the easiest drill rig to stop's the first one. The hardest one will be the 10,000th. It'll be more than that though in the UK, because you're doing shale over there predominantly. Shale needs a lot of wells, leads a lot of destruction, poisons a lot of water.
If this gets the tiniest foothold, you know, you're done. So it's now or it's never. Don't think that you've got that long, because it's now or never. So you do it now, you stand up now, and you find something within yourself that you didn't think was there. You know, that's the important thing. You will be confronted by police. They wear their Kevlar suits, and it's a big intimidation thing.
Hey, you've got nobody in front of you. Keep walking the way of this lady. Keep going. Don't push back on her. Keep moving. Now. If you've got to keep going. Keep moving.
It's up to the people of the UK to get their cameras in the face of the Kevlar security, the Kevlar police, who are paid by the corporations. And we have to say no. That's all it is. But it's more than just saying no at a meeting. It's intent. It's the intent of no. It's the knowing that you mean no. That's when you will be unbelievably powerful. You come out in numbers. If they see your grandmother and the mother and the child come out and say, we are not going to accept this, then they are finished. But that's what it takes. Don't sit back and think that anybody's looking out for you. It's you.
Think that anyone's looking out for you, it's you. Brian, I mean, at the time we were recording that, I don't think you, David, or I could have ever imagined the impact that that particular scene would have, and it has truly resonated with many people throughout the country. And what are your thoughts when you look back on that?
Well, yeah, I can't believe we actually said it. It sounds pretty profound, which is a bit out of our league, but
it was from the heart. It was truly from the heart.
Yeah. Well, it is from the heart, because the last thing I would want anyone to do is to live the life that we have and are going to live, because most of Western Queensland relies on underground water, and 27% of Australia sits on the Gab. I mean, we're talking about destroying a third of the underground water, well, probably more than a third of the underground water, but a third of the area of Australia, and allowing it to all go to foreign companies, because that's it. And Ian, back in I got involved in this through a group of people who were called the Western Downs Alliance at the time. And we were a pretty pathetic alliance, because we never had meetings and we never took minutes and we never did anything really. We would just say, blockade on at such and such, and everyone would turn up. And but we looked at this, and I remember a fellow called Scott Collins, and we poured through ream after ream after ream of literature, and what we predicted back then was the destruction of the water bores in this entire region, well, in most of Queensland. We predict and we predicted the thousands of wells that would be required, even though they were only talking exploration at the time. And the sad part is that our predictions have come true, and our further predictions are that once the subsidence sets in, because nature hates voids, and we will have subsidence, and most of the rest of our predictions are yet to fall into place, but they're going to, because literally there are just thousands of these wells being drilled very quietly. I was going to say about your Member of Parliament there. Your Member of Parliament needs to go for a little bit of a fly out to Australia or the UK and find out how many locals actually work in this industry. In fact, find out how many fair income boots on the ground work in this industry, because she's going to find that virtually no locals will work in the industry, because they might spill the beans at the first blowout or the first frack failure or the first water contamination. So they don't employ locals, and they don't. So most of the people, like whenever we go down to Brisbane, which is very rarely, Brisbane's our state capital, whenever we go down there, I pass mining vehicles coming out from Brisbane, the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast here in Queensland. They fly in. When you go to the airport, you see the high-vis brigade flying in from Sydney or Melbourne or the UK or New Zealand or the US, Canada, wherever. They don't employ locals. If you think this is going to, if anyone in your communities think this is going to save their community, boy, oh boy, they got a new experience coming their way, because they don't employ locals, or if they do, you might be allowed to turn the stop go sign on the roadworks. I suppose you have them over there, but or if you live in a capital city, you might get to bring the water pipes out or the gas pipes out on a semi-trailer, but you won't be a local to the region. And this is crap. That's what I said about that report that the chief economist wrote. It shows the absolute crap if you do an update on it. When he wrote that report, he told the truth. But in reality, the truth dissipated, or his truth dissipated into the reality of what we live here almost immediately. That was released on data. It was actually released after the boom had crashed on data of the boom. And they will use that against you. I'm telling you now, they've probably made sure that your member of parliament has got a copy of that. But that's a lie. Now it's a lie. It wasn't a lie when he wrote it. I'm not saying it was, although some of it was pretty dubious, especially about the 43 gas wells proving that Queensland was safer than the US.
Well, Brian,
I mean,
one of the pro-fracking brigade, like I said, yeah, the pro-fracking brigade is very, very small. And in fact, the industry uses them as mouthpieces because, you know, one of the things that we're absolutely able to prove beyond any reasonable doubt is that some of the pro-fracking community are putting out literature that there is no way they penned, no way in hell. And so, you know, they are literally being used as a front. One of these individuals is actually an owner of some holiday cottages. And one of the reasons that she is very much pro the industry is because to date, she has had the benefit of providing the accommodation for some of the employees that, you know, come from out of the area or out of country or whatever. And of course, she and probably others as well think that if this industry gets kicked off, then, you know, there's going to be a lot of people coming into the community. They're going to need accommodation, and she's going to make out like a bandit. I mean, what would your counsel be to her?
Oh, my counsel would be to her that she's in for a very, very short run, but she's probably going to make quite a lot of money along the way. Don't get me wrong, she will. But remember that, well, out here anyway, and I presume it's the same worldwide, the people drilling the wells and doing the fracking don't live in the community. Like they don't even live on the well pad. Our camps are 20, 30, 40 kilometres away from where they're drilling. So if they're going to drill her backyard, then I doubt very much she's going to have anyone living in that backyard because of occupational health and safety. They don't care about the residents, but they still have to care about their workers. They've got legislation that controls what they do to their workers. There's no legislation that controls what they do to the human beings that live in the region. But yes, she's going to make a lot of money. I'll give her a classic example, though, if she wants a good example. We had a company called Maguire Coaches. Now, Maguire's a a family name in Chinchilla, and Maguire Coaches would have made quite a lot of money. But of course, she went belly up and has sold out, and her shop front's gone now, and she's now run for council, and she's now in council, right? But my point being, though, is the bus companies alone that were running people around have changed hands 3 times. And no doubt each change of hands, it gets cheaper and cheaper because it's a boom bust situation, and we're now in the bust. We only lasted maybe 3 or 4 years of intense development, and now we're busted. I drive past businesses all the time that are shutting down.
Well, Chinchilla, you were telling me when we spoke a couple of weeks ago that Chinchilla has almost become like a ghost town.
Yeah, well, it's worse than what it was before the industry came. There's lots of empty houses. They're brand new houses everywhere that are empty. And what they're going to do is bring in, because we've got the Commonwealth Games coming up down there on the Gold Coast, they want to relocate all the people so that they can house the competitors and their entourages. And they're going to relocate people, pay rent for them out here to fill these empty houses. But all the investors that bought and built these empty houses, they're all got to be going to the wall one after another. And it puts me in mind of an elderly couple who were conned by the investment opportunity, and they bought an investment home. and mortgaged themselves to the hilt to do it. And now they're in the process of losing both their original home and their investment home, because a house that was being rented out for $1,000 a week now can't get $250 a week. And I don't know how that translates into UK pounds or euros, but yeah, it's like, I don't know, this is like the Twilight Zone. Every piece of logic that you look at about this industry says it shouldn't be anywhere. And yet you've still got people like your MP who've been conned, no doubt wined and dined and shown all this bullshit figures. Like when they came here, there were going to be hundreds of thousands of jobs. Then it was 40,000 jobs, and then it was 20,000 jobs, and then it turned into probably 5,000 jobs times the three different. So the same 5,000 people worked all over Australia, if you know what I mean. They went from gas fields in Queensland to gas fields in Western Australia, but it was still the same 5,000 people. It didn't create 40,000 or 100,000 or even 20,000 jobs like they said it would. It created 5,000 jobs, and those 5,000 jobs just followed the industry around.
And it would probably be much the same here. Now, Brian, we got to, unfortunately, we're coming towards the end of the programme. I just want to get your thoughts on this too, because about a month ago now, the new British Prime Minister actually announced that there would be a 10 million pot, which would come from the profits of these companies, and this would be allocated to householders. She even went on to state that the money could be paid direct into their bank accounts. And here I got the headline here from the one of the British online newspapers, and the headline was, "Will you hit the frack pot? Theresa May's stunning cash payouts to families with households offered up to £13,000 in the Great Shale Bonanza." And in fact, in the community that's being targeted because of the small number of properties, although all the properties are literally, as you can, I think, see in this graphic here. There we go. This is the well down here in the corner. This is Yorkshire's most profitable tourist attraction, and this is the village. So the village literally lies between the well site and this tourist attraction. I think it's 154 properties in this community, and so if we divide the 10 million by the 154 properties, you're looking at something like about £64,000 per household, which, you know, obviously is going to pit the community against each other. It's probably going to pit families against each other as well. What would your counsel to those people be, Brian?
Okay, well, did they say out of the profits?
Yes, they did, actually, yes.
Okay, so we both know Shell over here has been trying to work out how to stop paying any royalties at all, as is Origin, because what they're saying is that the cost outlay is far greater than the return. Now, none of these companies pay tax over here, or if they do, it's so near to nothing. I mean, they're listed in the companies that don't pay tax, basically. The thing is, there is no profit in this by the time they do all their write-offs and all their, you know, their paperwork scandals and all their subsidies from council and so forth and from the government. So I would suggest that if you got even 5%, and I think it's really well documented in a lot of cases in the US where people were promised, you know, 1.5% of the take at the well or whatever, only to find that the profit at the well, only to find that there was no profit supposedly at the well, and yet they were still selling gas and so forth, but they wrote everything off. And I think by the time you pay your CEO, you know, £20 million and you pay someone else 20 million, you pay off all the brown paper bags to all the politicians, there isn't going to be a profit. So those people are not going to get their £60,000 at all like they think, because 10% of nothing is nothing. And so if it's in any way tied to profit, I can guarantee that those people are going to be very, very sad at the end of it, because there will be no profit. This industry will make sure they write everything down.
Well, you know, and if anybody needed an example of how sociopathic the corporations are, and of course those who head up these corporations, there's a railway company in the UK that is running an appalling service, was pleading poverty, pleading that it had no money to be able to invest. And the day after, they were eventually promised a £20 million payout from the British government to be able to invest in additional rolling stock and additional staff. The company announced profit of £100 million. I mean, you know, these. I'm choosing my words very carefully because I'm in danger of using an expletive. But these sociopaths, are basically driven by pure greed, and the fact that they provide either a poor service or they, as you say, you know, don't care about the impact on the communities, because that's just collateral damage, pure collateral. So, Brian, unfortunately, we're at the end of the show. Once again, the hour has gone incredibly quickly. Thank you for persevering with us. The camera combined with the rising sun there in Queensland. But here we are in the UK. We are still frack-free. The only frack to have occurred is the one from 2011, which led to the moratorium. The moratorium was lifted in December 2012. We are still frack-free. The industry is ramping up to get the bits in the ground for 2017. Brian, final words of counsel to those communities who find themselves living in a licensed area.
Well, I tell you what, it's pretty damn simple. It starts with one well, and your life will never be the same afterwards. So you let them get the first well in, and then one day someone from, I don't know, somewhere in Europe is going to be talking to you by Skype and saying, what's it like being collateral damage? And I tell you what, anyone that stands up and says, geez, collateral damage feels really good, the health impacts are great, then you know they've been paid off by the government, or by the companies rather. But the reality is, it's exactly as your video says. It starts with one well, you stop the first one, you stop the lot.
Brian, thank you so much. I know we'll have other conversations, and of course, your near neighbour, Helen Bender, was on a show earlier this year after, of course, tragically her father committed suicide after fighting this industry for a decade. And hopefully Helen will be joining us in a few weeks to give us her take. And sadly, of course, she will simply be endorsing everything that you have said, because everyone's experience in Australia, certainly those who have refused to take the dirty money, is identical. And of course, those who have taken the dirty money are prevented from talking with us anyway. So, Brian, sorry.
Sorry, mate, I know we're out of time, but Helen is, with some other people, are in the process of putting together a small video clip, which I think is going to tear the hearts out of most people. So I'll get her to send that to you when she finishes it, because it's to do with her animals, which she would have talked to you about. And it's the tragic effect. And they run a piggery as well. And pigs and humans are very similar in physical makeup. And when you see that video, yeah.
I know. Helen, spoke to me, and I mean, it is literally, as you say, heart-wrenching. And people around the UK, you need to see this. And here's a little bit of a heads up. On October the 6th, the Harrogate Debating Society will be hosting a debate, and the debate will be on the topic of "This House believes that fracking should be banned in the UK." The motion will be proposed by John Plummer, who is the chairman of Frack Free Harrogate. He will be seconded by yours truly. And apparently the opposition will be a gentleman by the name of Ken Wilkinson, who I recall turned up to attempt to heckle at one of my Fractured Future events back in 2013 before being ejected by the rest of the audience. And he will be seconded by Lorraine Allinson, who I might have alluded to earlier, as she is the owner of the holiday cottages I referred to in North Yorkshire. So that is October the 6th. That is at 7 p.m. And if you simply search Harrogate Debating Society, you'll find their website, and you'll find there that you can reserve your tickets. That's October the 6th. I'll mention that again, obviously, in episodes of Fracking Nightmare between now and then. Meanwhile, Brian, as always, an absolute pleasure. Please give my regards to David and the rest of the family. And we'll speak again soon, I'm sure. And that's it from me. Thanks, Brian. That's it from me. Good night. And I will see you next week with episode 93 of Fracking Nightmare.